Hi, my name is Ellie White, and I want to tell you about how I went and had a surgery, and during the surgery, I died 7 times. And what God did with my life as I spoke to Him and prayed to Him to please send me back because I needed to take care of my little girl, my little daughter. And I had a friend of mine who was a pastor that I helped with in several AA and NA groups. I've never done any alcohol or drugs or smoked a cigarette. I've been completely and utterly celibate for more than a few years right now, and just utterly alone. So I had no one to go with me to this surgery. So I asked this pastor that assists in one of the AA houses where I would go and do Bible studies in the morning, take people down to go see um, their children or their restraining orders, or they're getting their paperwork for getting their kids back because they're just released from jail. Whatever it was, I would help them with that every day. And then I would take a little boom box and some of my CDs out to the garage in the backyard in the patio, and I would practice singing the songs that I was going to sing for different concerts in Italy and in the Midwest. Then at nighttime, I would help and take all the people to different NA or AA meetings. And it was a little peculiar when people would say, "Well, how long have you been clean?" And I'm like, "I've never done anything." I felt like kind of like the nerd of the group, but they were happy that someone was there to take them there every day and to try and get them clean and such. So I asked the pastor that was associated with this group if he would go with me down to Los Angeles and take me where I needed to get surgery to take a lump out that we didn't know what it was. It was cancer or what it was, but it was this hard lump that was pressing against my eye. And I went down and I go into surgery, and the doctor was a Middle Eastern doctor who decided that he didn't like um, my hairline because some of them have, a lot of hair that comes way down close to their eyebrows, and you got this little tiny face peeking out. And so instead of doing the surgery that he was supposed to do, which was just a tiny little shot of, local anesthesia on my eyelid and my eyebrow, and then make a little half-inch incision, grab this, 1 inch little ball of hardness out from behind my eyeball, and it was right there. It was just a tiny little, we're gonna spray something to numb you for a second, make a half-inch slice, pull out this little lump, so you back up, boom, you're done. Well, I explained to him that I'm deathly allergic to several different kinds of anesthesia and morphine and codeine, and they just ignored me. The doctor later made jokes about how he is going to use me as a paint canvas and do whatever he wants to me. So instead of doing local anesthesia and a little tiny half-inch slice by my eye or my eyebrow, they ended up putting me under full anesthesia. And the guy, I woke up, but I had no way of alerting them because the agent which paralyzes you was working, but the pain agent absolutely was not. And this man took a knife and started sawing back and forth from one ear all the way up over the top of my skull to the other ear. And I feel him sawing and sawing and sawing. And he was a little perturbed that the knife wasn't sharp enough. And he grabbed my skull and yanked it as hard as he could right at the front of my hairline to try and rip some of the hairs that he was having trouble cutting. So as I'm sitting there And this is happening, and I'm appalled, realizing that I am suffering from basically being scalped by a doctor. He cut all the way from one ear up and over the top of my head to the other ear as he's sawing away with a knife like I'm some sort of a Christmas turkey. And then when he grabbed my scalp and yanked it as hard as he could to rip the remaining hairs that hadn't been cut, I was in such deafening pain. And I thought, what should I do? I don't have any way to alert him, to tell him that I can absolutely feel everything. The only thing that's working is the paralyzing agent. And I said, I know, I can just make my heart just start pumping them really crazy so they realize something's wrong. And God told me, no, don't do that. If you do that, that's why people die in surgery, because they're trying to tell the doctor that the paralyzing agent is working, but the pain agency is not. And all of a sudden, because he had literally peeled back my entire scalp from off my head and peeled my face forward to try to get to where this little lump was under my left eye, I realized that I'm now sitting there, a bloody skull, with absolutely nothing of my face and my hair and my head left on my scalp. And I'm awake. And I know that I'm sitting there, a bloody skull with no face, no hair, no scalp, no nothing. And blood was just pouring from everywhere, and I could feel it dropping onto my skin and things. And that's when I felt myself die for one of 7 times. And God kept sending me back. And at one point, I'm looking across the room, and I see the doctor, and he's talking to another man, and I don't know where that man came from or why he was there. I assumed that he was wearing all dark clothing, same color. I think they actually called the paramedics to have them assist in trying to bring me back to life. And he was explaining to the man about how I had just died, and I'm looking at them, again, a bloody skull, no face, just eyeballs inside of sockets. And my left eyeball was falling out because they had cut whatever it is that helps hold your eyeball in place inside of your head. And somebody screamed and said, "We're losing her again. She's dying again." And that time, as I started to feel my safe self slipping away, I prayed, God, please don't let me die right now. I need to get back to my little daughter. Just let me go back to my little daughter and get her graduated from high school. I'm sorry. So I ended up coming back, and they couldn't get rid of me fast enough, which should have been 10 minutes in local anesthesia. Ended up being like 12 hours and full general anesthesia, and they sat me up and started trying to get my clothes back on me, and the doctor slammed his knee into my back trying to keep me upright. They couldn't keep me upright because I had lost so much blood during the surgery. So they basically picked me up and stuck me in this pastor's car and sent me to go home to the mountains. And as I'm sitting there in this car, they gave me this bucket, and I was projectile vomiting and very, very, very weak. I couldn't speak or anything. And I remember as they put me in the car, the pastor was saying, "Oh my God, what did you do to her?" And they had bound my head. I looked like a mummy. They had bound my head, wrapped around and around my forehead, around from side to side, and then they had wrapped me around from the top of my head and under my chin. And literally the only thing that was peeking out was a tiny little slit for my mouth so that I could eat, and the holes for my eyes. So here I am wrapped like a mummy for what should have been a little half-inch slit on the top of my left eye to take a hard ball of something, we didn't know it was cancerous or what, from under my eyebrow and right there. You know, they could have just made a tiny little slice, popped it out, sewed that right up, and they would have been done. And instead, the doctor had allowed some other new interns or something to operate on me, and they cut underneath my left eye, and I have this giant, like, thing that you can see that goes all the way around my cheek and across and underneath my eye. And they had, as they were scalping me, they ended up cutting my ear. Ow, that hurt so bad when they did it. And you can see a line right here. And they cut the ear and then attached it back. And they went in and shaved in my head. And I have lines that go all the way back here and down and around. Same on both sides. Same all the way across the front. And they had only taken my hairline down a half an inch. And they rolled the skin up from the scalp underneath, and I had this giant crisscross patchwork going in and out, all over the top of my head, and then back through the, the other ear. And obviously that made so much scalp, scarring that on my scalp, the hair didn't grow back there. So I ended up going back to my house, and they asked if the pastor would stay there for, a while to make sure that I didn't die again and nobody be there. So I slept next to the toilet and was throwing up every half an hour all night long. And when he tried calling them and asking them for help and what should we do, no ER wanted me because, then it would be their death. It would be their fault. And so I don't know how I got to driving, but after a couple of days of this, I ended up deciding it's Sunday, I have to get to church. And so I drove to a church, and I went in, and I now had been allowed to take the mummy bandages off of me, which were several inches thick and so full of blood that it absolutely smelled like blood and like death all up and down on my street for quite a while afterward, for maybe a week or so afterward. It smelled as bad as major blood all over the streets kind of thing. So I get myself to this church, and I put on a dark outfit and a scarf that was kind of all patterned, multicolored, and a little bit thick, but which I could see from underneath. And I used it to cover my whole head, front, back, and sides, down to about my chest. And I walked in and I sat in the back of the church and listened to the sermon. And at the end of the service, this lady that I knew but didn't recognize me came over and sat down next to me and peeled off to me the plan of salvation like in 60 seconds. And she was just going like motor mouth, and it's okay, and we love you, and Jesus loves you, and you just gotta have Jesus in your heart. And she assumed because I had this whole headdress thing going on that I was a Muslim woman. And then next, instantly came running over the pastor, and I'm like, yo, it's me. And I told him what she had done, and he said, well, Thank you for having the good grace to just let her finish witnessing to you. And so I don't remember driving there at all. I just remember being there and her saying what she did and the pastor. And the next thing I knew, I was at a friend's house that was about a mile away from there, who happens to be Arabic, and they begged me to take off the headdress. They are Catholic Arabics, not Islamic Arabics. And they were very not wanting anyone to think that they were behind making me be completely covered. And so I showed the one guy that I'd been friends with for a dozen years. I said, okay, I'm going to take this off and don't freak out because I look bad. I was gray, I was green, and just looked utterly horrible. And I took it off and he's like, no, that's okay. It's just more comfortable for us if we're not sitting here with someone who has like a full Arabic heading covered up. So I'm sitting there and his cousin walks in, they start cooking a meal, and the phone rings, and it's my little daughter. I had left her with her stepfather, and she had just finished cheerleading for a game at her school and had gone to our house. And as she's starting to open up her homework, he ran about a block away to his shop to supposedly to go get some papers. And when he came back, the police were right in front of him and they were trying to take her. And they said, no, it's not good enough for a stepfather. We were legally married to be in custody of a little girl. Okay. And so they took her, and it was all, a farce because they were paid $75,000 per each of the 5 individuals that participated to harass me so that nobody would find out that my house had been stolen by Mr. David H. Warganese, who is family of, and told me that he changed his name, that it used to be Wasserman. And of course, we all know a very famous Wasserman. And he said that he had taken $300,000 from stealing my farm and used it to pay these individuals to harass me and to take away and strip me of absolutely everything that I had, so nobody would find out that he had, in the end, taken 20,000 homes from people in Wisconsin merely because they were Black or Hispanic. And from that, he then took a second chunk of money, this time $3 million, he said, and he told me that he paid it to our Democratic female leader in case if she gets elected as president, then his family member, DWS, is to get the position of SOS, Secretary of State. So I called my doctor and I said, they're stealing my daughter. And he, said, well, you died 7 times in surgery. And, if you need to pull over and rest, pull over and rest. I understand that you have to save your little girl. Go ahead and get her. And so I don't remember driving at all, except for one place where it was very bright and I was entering into a tunnel. Other than that, I have absolutely no idea how I got there. I don't remember driving. I remember praying, that I was praying the whole way that I'd be able to get there, that the angels would protect me and somehow just transport my car and me there to Cody, Wyoming to rescue my little girl. And they hid her from me, and they took her and put her in 2 different old people's houses. And then this man came forward who had just entered the state 6 months before. And he went to them and said, I want that little girl because I hate women and I need someone to keep my little girl occupied. And she's right in between the age of these two daughters that I have. And so, give her to me and she'll have great company with my two little daughters. Well, what he didn't tell them was that he was an officer who had been chased out of Idaho for really vindictively going after anyone that he had written a ticket to as a policeman. He would get their address and such and call them up and pretend like he was having an affair with the wife or whatever, until the people broke up. If they were not absolutely lovable and courteous to him when he wrote them a ticket, he would see them through to huge, awful, vindictive acts. And so this is now who has my little daughter. So the only thing that I remember is the tunnel, and I'm going 1,200 miles between Los Angeles and Cody, Wyoming. Please remember that name and don't ever go there. And I asked God, I said, I need to know where my daughter is. I don't know where she's at. And I saw instantly this vision, and I could see this neighborhood, and it was night, and I could see, a mobile home in this neighborhood of mobile homes. And so I'm thinking, okay, where is this? And I'm like, I know where this one mobile home park is, and it can't be there because there's a hill and some other things involved. And I asked him, I said, where is another mobile home? Not that one, but where is there a different one? And I just got in my car and started driving. Nobody knew anything. Nobody could help me from this vision. And so I drove further and turned left the same direction as the first mobile home was, just kind of past that a ways. And I'm driving through it, and I start to see things that are familiar. And then I see the house that I had just seen in this vision an hour earlier. And I was able to get out of my car, and I went up to the door, and I knocked on the door, and the mother of the little girls came to the door, and I asked her, do you have Crystal here? I was told to come straight here and get her as soon as I got back. And immediately this husband that had been fired as an officer for beating up on people and doing all these weird vindictive acts in Idaho, recent new arrival to Cody, Wyoming 6 months earlier, came to the door, and he took her and he started beating her in front of me. And he beat her down onto the floor, and as he's punching her, he's saying, I told you, you stay hidden, you don't let her see you, you don't open the door, you don't let her be able to look inside. And he got up and he said, you look like you're dying, and I want you to die and leave. Your girl can keep my girl company, and then I can just keep them out of the house from now on. And he had taken away my daughter's phone, and I didn't know what to do. I called services and told them what the problem was with that he wouldn't give her to me. And they scheduled court for right away. And I went into court and I showed the judge the burn marks all over my legs where they had revived me with those electric paddles to try to bring my heart back. And they had actually given me heart meds to try to restart the heart because nothing was working in the 7 times that I had died. And they were completely and utterly not sympathetic whatsoever. As after I called services, I got in my car and I prayed and I wasn't sure what to do. And I could hear him yelling, and I could see the lit bedroom window, And when I was able to talk to my daughter finally, she said that his little girl was on the floor in the closet playing with guns that he had given her, and he sat on the bed right next to my daughter and was telling her what he was going to do to her and stuff. And just because the guy came, from Idaho 6 months earlier, all that services told me is the only requirement we have is to check our local crime. And if he hasn't done anything in our city in the last year, then, he's as good as anybody else as far as taking care of a child. So we gave him to her. And I'm like, why would you give her to somebody that you don't know anything about, who's beating this mother and sitting on a bed next to my daughter, telling her horrible things he's going to do to her? And the police of the city took her keys away from her and gave them to people that I don't know, that I never would have even allowed in my house, much less giving them my keys. And people were going through and just taking everything of ours out of our house. And it was the most awful experience in my life being in Cody, Wyoming, and everything that they did to me. They ended up saying that a parking ticket on my car the day after I had arrived had turned into 4 warrants. And I finally got my little daughter home, and they jumped through windows with guns and said, "Why are these windows open?" And it's like, well, I don't know. It's summer and it's 105 degrees, and they took my daughter and drove her around in a police car and made her witness them harassing and beating up other people all night. And then they put me into a solitary hold and didn't tell me why they had taken me. They took me in underwear with no shoes, refused my heart meds, and my nose is exploding and blood pouring out all over. And they come on the microphone and just laugh and say, "Oh, well, we'll get a nurse to see you eventually." And I think they sent in a nurse finally to see me 3 days later and made me strip down to absolutely nothing in front of the front desk, where there were male prisoners, sweeping the floor and doing little tasks, where there was a male officer standing right at the door. And it was the most awfulest thing that I've ever been to in my life. And they put me back into this solitary hold. After a while, they had just wanted to see if I was lying or not that I don't have any tattoos, because they said they've never seen a full body of a nice looking lady and not having any tattoos. So this male officer is like checking me out naked, and this lady doctor, is going to try to make me go on meds that I don't need, and then was going to give me only a bare minimal, like less than half dose of what my heart pills were supposed to be, just enough to where my head was in incredible pain, but kind of like torture, keeping me alive, but not letting me have enough for it to do anything sufficiently good for my body to where my heart and my head wouldn't be hurting. And they threw me back into a solitary hold with a very violent woman in the next solitary cell. And she was screaming one day for hours about how she was going to kill me and come and get me when she got out for her hour, where they would just unlock her door and let her into a mutual space. And I kept calling and calling and calling for guards for hours, and nobody would come. And so after that episode finally ended, a couple days later, I'm sitting there and I'm reading my Bible, and I'm reading about Paul getting let out of prison. And all of a sudden, I hear this clunk, 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 clunk. Every single door in the whole prison opened. And it's a small town, and so they had the men's area and the women's area adjoining, with a central operation in the middle. And I could hear every door in the male and the female's areas all unlocking. And the guy that was the son of the main jailer came running in, and he was shaking from head to toe. And he's like, "Stop doing that. Stop doing that." They knew that I was praying and singing and reading my Bible, and um, God came to me several times and said, I want you to pray real specifically. What do you want right now? Pray real specifically. What is it you want? I said, I want to get out of here. And then before I was done praying, they came over on the loudspeaker and said, we need to get you to a phone right away. And so I walked out into the hallway and I picked up the phone, and the individual on the other side said, the judge is sending you home tomorrow. They want you out of here. They're afraid that God's going to destroy the whole city for wrongfully keeping someone who doesn't even have any sin or anything in their life. And so I don't know why they didn't let me go on the spot, but they kept me until the next day till they could get it on the judge's calendar. Took me down to the jail. We're driving to the street back into the courthouse, and I see my ex is sitting on the porch of the famous Irma Hotel in town, partying with a bunch of people as I'm driving into the jail to talk to the judge so that they could let me free. So all I can say is that I don't remember 9/10 of what happened and how I was able to drive 1,200 miles after dying 7 times, but I'm positive that God must have picked up that car and transported it and got me to the neighborhood and showed me the vision of what neighborhood and what house and where I was going to drive and how I was going to park and where I was going to be seeing and looking at from that position. And I just drove and drove until I got to, a place that looked the same, and I walked up to this house, and there she was. And our persecution was definitely not over. My daughter and I were both kidnapped 3 different times by this extremely, extremely evil town. But God got us through it. And God doesn't say you're going to have the happiest life in the whole world. But he said, I will be there with you and I will take you through it all. So for me to go through what should have been a simple, tiny little half-inch slit halfway between my eye and my eyebrow on the left side, and it turned into me literally being scalping, but not being able to tell the doctor that I was in utter, complete pain, and I can feel him tugging and yanking at my skull, and I know I'm sitting there a bloody skull, and my left eyeball falls out of the socket, and I had to go for months of taping my eyes closed 24 hours a day and doing different things with my eyes, and I have to hold my eye in a certain way just to, keep it from happening again. God will be there for you through whatever your difficulty is. And they knew that by taking my daughter twice, jumping through windows with guns, and this guy is, I'm standing there and he's full on laying with his body over my little daughter who just fell asleep and gets waked up with a cop in uniform with a gun on her, a little girl, a sweet little girl that's gotten straight A's her whole life, and because of those incidents was not allowed to go to college. Her friends have come and gone. And she has now spent most of the last 6 months in hospitals because she has cancer. And she has cancer from the chemtrails that are being pumped over where we live now in California. So please, pray for us, and we'll pray for you too. Please feel free to share with me your story at buffalostudy@yahoo.com. Or if you'd like to help us get back on our feet, or even send me gas money so I can go and see my little girl in the hospital, that's PayPal/Buffalo Study, or P.O. Box 31, Big Bear Lake, California, 92315. And no matter how hard it is, just know that God will stay with you, and when he comes, he's bringing his reward with us. And sometimes people go through events like this so that you won't be in hell and be lost forever. It's to save your life that we're trying to bring you these stories now. Thank you so much, and I'll see you all in heaven. Thank you.